Good afternoon. It is absolutely marvelous to meet you this afternoon, except we're not really meeting. Hey, it's one-way traffic. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to talk about a subject or topic that's very dear to my heart, and that's the whole thing of school readiness. To me, it's like air. You just have to, um, you just have to know what school readiness is, but it seems like some people don't quite know what school readiness is really about. And it is about the readiness for school. But my child has been in school for quite a while. So, what's school readiness? It's actually that tremendously important leap between preschool years, the first 5, leading up to 6 years, those are the preschool years, and being ready to leap from grade R into grade 1. It's a tremendous leap because it's a mental leap, it's an emotional leap, it's a social leap, but it's very specifically a physical leap as well. And when a child is ready for that leap, it is so easy to adjust, to belong in grade 1, and to thrive. So this session is for anybody who is either a mom or a teacher involved with preschool children, specifically grade R, but it's also for foundation phase because we have many children, not learners, they're children. We've got many children in grade 1, 2, 3, even 4, 5, 6, 7 who weren't school ready. And because of that, they battle to learn. Learning is natural. Everybody can learn. Everybody can learn in their own way. But there's a special kind of readiness needed before a child can thrive in grade 1, because that's when we have to conquer not language, but the symbols of language. And the symbols of language aren't real things. They're abstract. They don't grow anywhere. You can't buy them anywhere. You can't give me it. You can't find it anywhere. It's just part of a word. So in preschool, we focus on language and we focus on the development of the child in totality. And in a way, the development of the preschool child is just like the development of the building of a house. We build a house. I am not saying a child's a house. I am saying the development of a child is very similar to building a house. We do not start with a roof. We start right at the bottom. And at the bottom of your child's development is the development of your child's physical body. A physical body, if you look at the diagram, you'll see that platform, which is the foundation, it's the floor. And if you've ever built a house, you'll know there's a lot of money that goes into the foundation of the house. We want to spend money on the fittings and the lights and tiles, but a lot of our money goes into the foundation because it actually determines how solid that house is going to be, or if it's going to show some cracks at some stage. And if you look at that foundation, build a house, you'll know you don't just pour cement on top of soil. You have to dig the foundation in. It has to be dug in so those bricks can actually hold. Well, the soil can hold the bricks and the bricks can hold onto the soil, so the floor is very stable. And in terms of human development and physical development, that means your child's senses need to develop and your child's muscles. So each of those pillars represent, the one to the left represents a child's sensory development. The pillar to the right represents a child's muscular development. A sensory development, we can talk about the senses for the whole afternoon, but sensory development takes place in a very specific sequence. So it's the sense of touch develops first, and then the sense of movement. Think of a baby. The whole baby is in utero. The baby is already exploring touch and proprioception, but touch specifically. And that baby moves in utero. And when that baby is born, what does that baby want? It wants your touch and it wants to move. And it doesn't only want to move, it moves. And with that comes smell and taste, because the senses of smell and taste are hugely important in terms of emotional development. So I'm still busy with physical development, because your child or a child's senses need to develop in a very specific sequence to develop different parts to the brain. It's fascinating. It's fascinating information. And up until just before the development of the ears, all those senses, there's one skin, there's one vestibular system, there's one nose, and there's one mouth. And it strongly influences the emotional development or the development of the emotional part of the brain. So when we get to the last two senses, the ears and the eyes, they are paired. And they are paired because they're more advanced. They're typically known, of course, they influence you on an emotional level, but they are typically associated with cognitive development, the development of thought, with language, everything to do with the clever part of the brain. So the brain has actually three layers or three levels. So the first is the physical development of your child. That's tremendously important and the most neglected most often. Just spoke about the senses, so let's talk about the muscles. So the muscles also develop in sequence. So it's the development of the neck, then the core, then the arms and shoulders, legs and hips, trunk rotation, so a child can sit up still and straight, and then the refinement of the other muscles, which is the mouth. And you'll notice that a baby sits way before they start speaking. It's the same with a child. So the inside part of the body needs to develop, so there's a strong tripod for the rest of the body to develop. And because when that body is nice and straight and strong, what happens? The arms are free to do what? For those hands to explore. So after the neck and the core has developed very nicely, the fine motor control, so it's arms, shoulders, and then it's hands and fingers, feet and toes, and finally the development of the eyes. It was fascinating. In terms of sensory development, the eyes are the last to develop. In terms of muscle development, the eyes are the last to develop. The eyes are incredibly precious, and that's why if there's an accident or an injury, what would a doctor always check? They check what's happening with the eyes, because the eyes are the last to develop. They are the most fragile, and they immediately indicate if there's some hiccup on the inside, if the trauma was a little bit more than seems like from the outside. So sensory motor development is at the heart of school readiness. And I'll talk a little bit about what happens and how do you recognize when a child is not physically ready. But get it, child's senses need to develop, child's muscles need to develop in a predetermined sequence till that child, round about the age of 14 months, can you believe that? Physically, that's the time frame between conception and 14 months of age is the prime time for the physical part of the brain and the body to develop. It never, ever, ever develops that rapidly and that gloriously compared to the time frame between conception and 14 months. So the moment that baby can now, which is now no longer a baby because probably that one can now toddle. So it's now called a toddler because they can walk. And when they walk around, just watch that face. And that's when we get the next level of the brain, which is the emotional development. Because the moment a child has good control over their physical body, it becomes so easy to feel confident. It becomes so easy for them to feel, I'm someone, and I'm somebody that wants to reach out to others. But a child's physical development needs to be in place before emotional development can really thrive. When a child feels confident, and because they are doing so many marvelous things, they get positive feedback, what happens? They start developing emotionally. And that's typically associated. Social development goes hand in hand when a baby starts losing all their attachments, whether that is, they'll always be attached to mom, they'll always be attached to dad, they'll always be attached to their teacher. Yeah. They love to attach, but they're not overly attached to plugs or bottles or blankies or a specific teddy. It's normal to want to have a favorite something. That is for pleasure. It's very different when you eat chocolate, because that's also associated with the emotional part of the brain. It's very difficult to eat chocolate for enjoyment. It's very vastly different when you have to have chocolate because you're addicted. Okay? So a healthy emotional development says, yes, I do have favorite things, but I can survive without them. And the moment a child can survive without those things, those attachments, that means that child is standing up straight, looking the world in the eye and says, I need to socialize. I need stimulation. And in lockdown, you would notice that your preschoolers are really battling without sufficient social stimulation. They need the interaction. They need that rubbing up. You know what is so interesting? The prime time for emotional development is between 14 months and 3 years. That's the time, doesn't mean it's the only time when a child develops emotionally, but that's the time when the child learns to detach from other things and attach to themselves. So they feel strong, so they are able to connect with other people. So the moment a child is between the ages of 3 and 4, they should be very ready to let go of mommy, to let go of dummy, bottle, blanket, teddy, all of that. They're not addicted to it anymore because they're now physically, emotionally, and mentally ready to socialize and to interact. And that's why between the ages of 4 and 11, between 3 and 4 is the prime time to learn to operate within a group. Yes, I know many children attend preschool or creche or baby care or day mothers where they with children of that same age at a much younger stage. We can have a conversation about that another day. But it is very interesting that ideally a child spends some time in a family hierarchy where there are children that are older and younger, so they're not of the same age. Because if they're of the same age, they're going to compete for attention, all of them at exactly the same time. Where in a family, because some children are older, they can wait a little bit longer. So there's a little bit more of a fair distribution of your attention. So social development is incredibly important. Between the ages of 3 and 4, it's the prime time when a child then interacts with other children. Okay, we're still on our way to school readiness because I want you to understand school readiness is not grade R. School readiness starts the moment from conception. It's actually preconception, but that's a talk for another day. So school readiness starts when you look at your child or the children in your class and you look at their milestones, their baby milestones, the way they navigated their milestones were actually beacons that tells a story, and it tells us how well is this child developing the brain, the physical brain, developing in a sequential manner. So every time a baby reaches a specific milestone, they're actually reaching a brain developmental milestone. Then emotional milestone between 14 months and 3 years, and then between the ages of 3 and 4. It's the time when the shapes and the letters and all of that stuff, it's not important. What's important is to be a human being, a decent human being that can share time, can share attention, can share space, can wait, learn social skills in preparation for the age group 4 to 11, which is a huge age group, because that's the time when we develop the clever part of the brain or the thinking part of the brain. So when we think of school readiness, many people think of the thinking part of the brain or the neocortex, or the roof part of the building of the house. That is school readiness. No, that is not the only part of school readiness. School readiness is about a child in totality, physically, emotionally, socially, and cognitively. So that beautiful ad that Chantal created that says you won't expect a fish to climb a tree, I think. You wouldn't expect a fish to climb a tree because they've got other skills. You know what? We expect children with challenges on the bottom levels to be able to prosper and progress on a roof level. But what if there are developmental cracks on a physical level? Or what if there are developmental cracks on an emotional or social level? It will show up on a cognitive level. And then you can remediate as much as you want to. But that's when, and I think you will be able to relate to this lockdown has been a very interesting time, but it has been amazing to see and to view one's own children and the children in your class in a completely different way. Because I think if there are parents watching, you would have noticed that your wonderful child, the moment you start doing anything that's faintly like schoolwork, now we need to define that just now, but anything where they can't do what they want to, but they need to follow instructions, you may have noticed that the child is very resistant. Don't go and Google authority-defined behavior. It's normal for a child to want to do what they want to do because they are still developing impulse control. So you see impulse control and the need to only want to do what I want to do. That sitting still, starting and finishing a task, it doesn't have to be book work. Strongly, strongly oppose a lot of paperwork unless it's a blank page. We strongly oppose that from the Mindfulness Institute because it's not in the best interest of a child. But when you see a child is resistant to any kind of work that you want to do with your preschooler, you need to stop because the relationship is more important than your child's academic learning at this stage. And when we talk about the relationship, let's quickly re-look our house. So you know the foundation represents physical development. You know the pillar to the left represents sensory development. You know that the pillar to the right represents the development of muscles, sensory motor development. So if a child has a developmental crack in terms of physical development, can you see that arrow? Can you see that arrow? There's information in, it turns immediately and it exits through the muscles. How will you, this is abstract, let's go concrete. If a child battles, a grade R child, battles to gallop or skip or catch a ball or stand on one leg for 10 seconds without hanging on or using the tongue or things like that. If a grade R child crawls and you ask them to look up and down and to the side while crawling, and they can maintain their crawling without any form of hesitation, it says the physical part of the brain is developing very, very nicely. If you tell your child, you ask your child to go to the kitchen to fetch 2 apples and three oranges and a wet cloth and a bowl, they should be able to do that because if they're preschool, they're supposed to be able to follow 5 consecutive instructions, carry it out, not only follow it, but carry it out exactly in the correct way. But if your child hears the instructions, starts running, and then, what must I do again? That's a typical indication that there's a little bit of a crack on a physical level. Child can't sit still and straight for an age-appropriate period of time. And I don't mean sit like a soldier. I just mean sit comfortably, sit straight, because if they can't sit straight, they're going to prop their head up, or they're going to lie on their arms when they're supposed to do some kind of activity at the table. And that's typically drawing on a blank piece of paper. That means your child is showing a developmental crack. And so that's not in the child's best interest to be in grade 1 if the child is still developing on a physical level. And the same thing happens when the child's physical body is getting nicely into place. The child is ready to focus. The child is sitting still, sitting straight, can catch a ball, can stand on one leg, things that we've mentioned already. But the child is very tearful. The child is very clingy. The child can't do a single thing without, Mommy, is this what I need to do? Yes. Is this exactly what I need to do? Yes. Use a red crayon. A red crayon, Mommy? Yes. Is this a red crayon, Mom? You know those children that are constantly asking for confirmation? They are saying, there's a little hole in the bucket, dear Liza, because their heart sits in a bucket, not really. But we always say emotional development is like a bucket. And when the emotional development is beautifully in place, there are no holes in the bucket. It's very easy for the child to work independently. But if a child constantly needs encouragement, acknowledgement, reminders, if they forget, it simply means that the child may have a little bit of a developmental crack on the emotional level. And when they play with other children, Well, maybe they don't want to play with other children. Maybe they want to be on their own all the time because they don't like being with other children, because they don't like to navigate and to wait they don't like that. They want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. That child is not ready for grade 1. Why? Because in grade 1, you can't do what you want to do. You have to do what you're told to do. Yes, there are moments when you can make choices, but a child needs to go beyond themselves, completely beyond themselves, because before they would be happy to learn with other people and share concentration and attention. You see, child with a problem with concentration, very often, that child may have a little bit of a developmental crack, either on a physical or an emotional level. That's why they're battling with concentration. More about that another day. And then finally, when a child has this happy, happy heart that is pumping like you cannot believe, and it's not rapid heartbeat all the time because that shows anxiety. Maybe it's a child where the heart is beating steadily and strongly because they're confident they are in control of their physical bodies. And because they are, they feel confident. And because they feel confident, they can share time and attention because there's no hole in the bucket. Eliza, and then information can flow to the thinking part of the brain. And then when it flows to the thinking part of the brain, that's when all kinds of what we call real learning, that's where the real learning takes place. Because the thinking part of the brain is a part of the brain that is associated with perception. What's perception? It's your ability to make sense of what you've just experienced. So if I talk like this, hello, fine, thanks. You will see that there's a discrepancy between what you see and what you hear. And that's when a child battles with sensory integration. That's exactly what happens. So the sound, what they see and what they hear, it doesn't get to the brain simultaneously. So it's very, very confusing. And they don't know what to pay attention to. And then we think the child has a problem with concentration. No. Problem seems like a problem with concentration. The child is actually concentrating very hard, but the child is not able to pull all of this together and execute while you're talking again. So that's typically a child that wants to avoid or avoids anything that is faintly related to schoolwork. And a puzzle counts as anything faintly related to schoolwork. And so does a pegboard. And so does a board with nails and elastics where you need to build specific shapes. And so is any kind of a game where you can't do what you want to do. Dominoes, Lotto, all those marvelous games that we play with children and that develop sensory perception, the ability to make sense of what you are experiencing, but simultaneously it develops language. And it's in that language, it's in that interaction when we play with each other, not when the child plays with a computer, but when the child plays with us. Child becomes human in interaction with other human beings. A computer is a marvelous thing to repeat, for repetition, to reinforce certain things. There's value in that. But to learn, we need a preschool child. Needs interaction with a caring adult, whether that's a parent, whether that is a caregiver, whether that is a preschool teacher, but they need interaction to develop language, because a child needs to be able to speak, understand a language, and speak a language before they can write and read a language. We often teach children preschool to do grade 1 work. Parents and teachers of preschoolers, I want to beg you, not urge, I want to beg you to look after the preschool children more on a physical and an emotional level at this stage than focus on all kinds of activities. You must remember, activities ain't school readiness. Skills lead to school readiness. There's a difference between an activity, something that you do. A skill is acquiring a very specific ability to do something that you have practiced over time. And as you, I hope you realize this afternoon, School readiness is not a grade R thing. School readiness starts preconception. It's something that takes 6.5 years to develop. Why does it take so long to develop? Because it's skills development. And the brain, if you know anything about the brain, it is that the brain loves repetition, and it does not appreciate being pushed to learn. Learning preschool happens over time when you lovingly engage with a child and challenge them, because they love challenge, but it must be age appropriate. School readiness is not an academic thing. And preschool children, according to the national curriculum in this country, is only supposed to recognize sounds through listening, not reading. A child preschool is not supposed to write or read anything other than their own name. Why? Because it's the most important thing in the whole wide world. Because your name says you are somebody and you're really important. We push grade 1 work onto unready brains in preschool children, and we are surprised if we kill their love of learning before they started grade 1. I want to urge you to walk a walk with us at School Readiness, at Mind Moves. We support you in all kinds of ways. Sometimes things are free, sometimes you need to pay, but it really doesn't matter. We're there to back you up, to enable the children in your care, whether it's your own children or if it's your own children or if it's other people's children, to please engage with age-appropriate activities. I thank you. I thank you for being with us, and I thank you for learning with us. We're going to record all your questions and we'll answer them one by one. We'll place them on Facebook so you can watch this video again if you want to, and you will be able to get answers to all your questions. Thank you for caring enough to spend time with us.